Every human empire begins with conquest and ends with corrosion. The same pattern unfolds not only in nations, but in the private empires we call relationships. Time does not merely age the body, it erodes illusions, ambitions, and the fragile balance of power that keeps two people orbiting one another. What begins as union gradually becomes negotiation, and what was once negotiation becomes silent warfare. Midlife is the battlefield where that war quietly explodes. Machiavelli would have seen the middle years as the moment when every individual, no matter how loyal, moral, or tender, tests the limits of their own dominion. The energy of youth that once flowed outward, building careers, families, and reputations, now turns inward. It begins to interrogate itself: have I ruled well? Have I been ruled by others? Have I wasted my power? When the answers are uncomfortable, rebellion follows. The target of that rebellion is rarely the self, it is the structure that mirrors one's choices, the marriage, the household, the people who once symbolized stability. Midlife rebellion is not madness. It is a strategy born of fear. When people feel their influence fading, they attempt to reclaim it through disruption. The same individual who once built a family to feel secure may dismantle it to feel alive. Desire mutates into resentment, love into comparison, partnership into power calculation. The surface explanation is emotional: I feel trapped, I need freedom, I want to rediscover myself. But the Machiavellian interpretation is colder. The mind, sensing the loss of leverage, seeks a new theater where it can still command. The rebellion that tears families apart is rarely about love. It is about control: who has it, who lost it, and who dares to seize it back. Midlife exposes the uncomfortable truth that most long-term unions survive not on passion, but on balance. When that balance shifts, through age, career change, fading desire, or shifting social value, one partner instinctively recalculates their position. They begin to act not as a companion, but as a strategist fighting to preserve relevance. This essay follows that transformation step by step, from the first tremors of dissatisfaction to the full-scale collapse of loyalty. It examines how identity decay leads to emotional manipulation, how nostalgia fuels betrayal, and how both men and women use Machiavellian tactics to avoid feeling powerless. It is not a moral tale. It is a study of psychological power at its breaking point, the moment when love becomes a battlefield and freedom is mistaken for victory. Every rebellion begins long before the first act of defiance. In politics, it starts with quiet doubt; in the mind, with quiet resentment. Midlife discontent is rarely loud at first, it seeps in slowly, disguised as restlessness, boredom, or nostalgia. A man or woman who once felt powerful within their domestic empire begins to sense a subtle erosion, not of comfort, but of importance. They are no longer the protagonist of their own story, they have become a supporting character in the very life they built. That realization plants the seed of revolt. In youth, ambition and romance share a single direction: forward. Everything feels like expansion, building, achieving, attracting. But the middle years reverse that trajectory. The future stops feeling infinite, the self stops feeling magnetic. The roles that once symbolized victory, spouse, parent, provider, begin to feel like cages. What was once a purpose now feels like a trap, because every identity maintained too long becomes an identity imposed. And so, beneath the calm surface of domestic life, a subtle whisper begins: I have given too much. I have become too predictable. I am fading. Machiavelli wrote that power is never lost suddenly, it is lost by degrees, through complacency and overfamiliarity. The same principle applies within the emotional kingdom of family. Once familiarity replaces fascination, power dynamics begin to rot. Partners stop seducing each other and start managing each other. Routine becomes the tyrant. What follows is not hatred, but a deep psychological fatigue, an exhaustion born of repetition. To the restless mind, predictability feels like death. So the psyche begins to crave disruption, not because it hates stability, but because it fears irrelevance. The tragedy of the midlife psyche is that it confuses peace with powerlessness. When daily life no longer requires conquest, the inner strategist atrophies. The same drive that once pursued success, attraction, and validation has nowhere to go but inward. It begins to attack the structure that contains it. People mistake this implosion for spiritual awakening or personal growth. In truth, it is often a strategic rebellion against the humiliation of stagnation. They want to feel alive again, and aliveness is redefined as unpredictability. The discontent deepens as comparison enters the stage. The social mirror becomes crueler with age. Others seem freer, more desired, more admired. Social media accelerates this decay, each scroll an invitation to envy, each image a reminder of decline. The mind begins to rewrite history: I chose wrong. I settled too soon. I gave up too much. Nostalgia becomes ammunition against the present. In that distorted reflection, the current partner becomes the symbol of everything one has lost. What was once devotion turns into a quiet accusation: because of you, I stopped being me. But rebellion needs justification. Few will admit, even to themselves, that their restlessness is self-inflicted. So the psyche fabricates moral cover. I'm not being selfish, it insists. I'm finally being honest. This self-deception is the first Machiavellian maneuver of the midlife rebels. They must disguise the pursuit of power as the pursuit of truth. Once that rationalization is complete, every act of betrayal, distance, or emotional withdrawal can be reframed as liberation. In this phase, manipulation becomes subtle. The dissatisfied partner doesn't yet destroy the relationship, they destabilize it. They withdraw affection to test control. They criticize to provoke a reaction. They create emotional scarcity to measure their own importance. These are strategic moves disguised as confusion. In Machiavellian terms, it is the testing of fortifications before an invasion. The goal is to see whether the other side still fears losing them, because fear is the last proof of power. What makes this rebellion so dangerous is that it hides behind the language of emotional growth. Society praises authenticity, self-discovery, and freedom, concepts easily weaponized by the midlife psyche to justify its rebellion. I need to find myself becomes a euphemism for abandoning responsibility. I deserve to be happy becomes an argument for destabilizing the very foundation that once brought meaning. The Machiavellian truth is cruel. When people invoke self-love as a reason to hurt others, what they truly seek is leverage. This is the silent phase before collapse, the psychological prelude where dissatisfaction transforms into calculation. The rebel has not yet acted, but the script is already written. Every cold glance, every unspoken comparison, every withdrawal of warmth is a rehearsal for independence. It is in this stage that relationships could still be saved, but rarely are, because both sides misinterpret the signs. The stable partner mistakes distance for moodiness, while the restless one interprets stability as weakness. And so the foundation begins to crack, not from conflict, but from quiet contempt. Machiavelli warned that the most dangerous enemy is the one who smiles while plotting your downfall. In family life, that enemy is not external, it is the disillusioned mind of a partner who believes rebellion is renewal. The palace still stands, but its ruler has already planned the coup. Once the seed of dissatisfaction takes root, the household becomes the arena. Every gesture, every silence acquires a strategic weight. What was once routine, shared meals, polite conversation, familiar affection, turns into a field of subtle maneuvers. The partner who feels imprisoned by the sameness of domestic life begins to experiment with distance, testing how far the other will reach to close it. Each withdrawal of warmth is a small exercise in power, a measurement of leverage. When the other reacts with confusion or desperation, the rebel feels a spark of superiority. I can still move the pieces. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must never allow himself to be too loved, for excessive affection weakens respect. In relationships, this lesson often emerges unconsciously. The restless partner senses that pity or predictable loyalty carry no thrill, so they provoke tension to restore polarity. Affection is rationed, communication becomes cryptic, and emotional scarcity replaces intimacy. The house remains intact, but the atmosphere changes from cooperation to surveillance, each side quietly studying the other's reactions. This phase of rebellion is rarely loud. It is characterized by psychological repositioning. One partner starts reclaiming separate territory, new hobbies, new friendships, new ambitions that no longer include the other. On the surface these pursuits seem harmless, even healthy, yet beneath them lies the instinct to rebuild identity outside the shared structure. The home ceases to feel like a base and begins to feel like a border to be crossed. Inside this climate, communication transforms into coded language. Questions become tests. Do you still understand me? Really means can I still manipulate your response? Compliments are measured investments. Criticisms are disguised power plays. The once collaborative couple begins to act like diplomats negotiating a fragile truce. Every conversation is a treaty that can be broken at will. At this stage, the rebel experiences a paradoxical mixture of guilt and exhilaration. Guilt because they know the stability they're undermining once kept them safe, exhilaration because each act of defiance proves they are still capable of shaping events. The feeling of being desired or feared again, even briefly, is intoxicating. It restores the illusion of potency that midlife erosion had stolen. And so, the rebellion deepens, not because it promises happiness, but because it recreates tension, the raw material of power. The partner who remains loyal begins to sense the shift but cannot define it. They feel that affection is now a negotiation. To maintain peace, they overcompensate, offering reassurance, making concessions, begging for clarity. In doing so they confirm the rebel's suspicion: control has changed hands. Machiavelli's principle of governance applies perfectly here: he who asks for loyalty already lacks authority. Once dependence is visible, respect diminishes. Eventually, the household divides into two psychological factions, one side still defending the old order, the other quietly building a new one. Shared decisions become contested ground, mutual routines are replaced by individual schedules. Even silence becomes political, each person waiting for the other to break it first. The family unit now mirrors a state on the verge of civil war, outwardly stable, inwardly fractured, both sides claiming moral legitimacy. At this point, small acts of sabotage begin to appear. Not overt betrayal, but neglect, forgetfulness, subtle exclusion. The rebel forgets to communicate plans, withholds information, and spends more time in places that dilute accountability. These are not accidents, they are symbolic declarations of autonomy. The other partner, sensing abandonment, may react with anger or control attempts, both of which feed the rebel's narrative of oppression and justify further withdrawal. It is a feedback loop where every effort to repair looks like proof of dominance, and every act of distance feels like liberation. The Machiavellian observer sees this clearly: the rebellion within the home is not about love lost, but about hierarchy reversed. When one person feels obsolete, they create a crisis to force recognition. The more chaos they generate, the more visible they become. In this way, domestic unrest becomes a theater for recovering self-importance. Peace, which once symbolized success, now feels like invisibility. Conflict becomes evidence of existence. By the end of this phase, the relationship stands at a strategic stalemate. The rebels have tasted freedom but not yet destroyed the structure that grants them identity. The loyal partner clings to order but no longer commands genuine influence. Both are trapped, one by nostalgia, the other by ambition. And yet neither will concede, because concession would confirm defeat. The rebellion within the home is complete when conversation turns performative and silence becomes the truest language left between them. When the quiet rebellion inside the household reaches critical mass, tension needs an outlet. The moment arrives when private calculations become public behavior. What began as emotional distance evolves into open competition for narrative control. Who is the victim? Who is the oppressor? Who holds moral superiority? In this phase the contest is no longer for affection but for interpretation. Each partner seeks to own the story of what went wrong, because whoever defines the story keeps the dignity of power. Machiavelli would note that when a ruler can no longer command loyalty, he must command fear, or sympathy. The same mechanism appears here. One partner begins to build alliances, friends, family members, even children become audiences for curated fragments of truth. Complaints are shared strategically, half in confidence, half as propaganda. The goal is not understanding, it is to gather emotional reinforcements before open confrontation. The household slowly divides into territories of loyalty. At this point, the emotional economy of the relationship collapses. Attention, validation, and approval become scarce currencies. Every interaction is a transaction. The simplest request, time together, conversation, intimacy, now carries the hidden cost of humiliation or rejection. Those who still seek closeness often feel as if they are negotiating with a foreign government rather than speaking to a spouse. The familiar warmth that once eased communication is replaced by calculation: if I say this, will it be used against me later? Betrayal enters not as a sudden act but as a strategy of escape. For the rebel, infidelity, emotional or physical, is less about passion and more about reclaiming agency. It is the most direct way to feel irreplaceable again. For the loyal partner, betrayal may take quieter forms: financial secrecy, withdrawal from shared plans, covert self-protection. Both are responses to the same fear, the fear of powerlessness. The Machiavellian truth is that betrayal inside long relationships is rarely about desire, it is about hierarchy. Whoever betrays first writes the rules of disengagement. The decay becomes visible in language. Sarcasm replaces humor, politeness replaces tenderness. Small disagreements escalate into tests of dominance. The rebels argue not to resolve but to prove that they no longer need permission. The loyal partner argues to restore order, believing that reason can still rebuild respect. But reason is useless once a conflict has become symbolic. Logic cannot negotiate with a wound to pride. Each word spoken in anger is a coin spent from the remaining treasury of goodwill, and soon there is nothing left to trade. As the conflict deepens, both sides experience a strange intoxication. The very chaos they claim to hate now gives them purpose. The daily friction, the tension, even the exhaustion, all confirm that they still matter to each other as opponents. Peace would mean emotional invisibility. Battle, at least, proves existence. This is the paradox that keeps many failing families locked together. War feels more meaningful than emptiness. The final stage of decay is the codification of indifference. People stop arguing not because they have reconciled but because they have accepted permanent stalemate. The house is divided into separate emotional republics. Shared spaces become corridors of avoidance. Both partners perform civility for appearances, but their internal allegiance has shifted entirely to the self. They have moved from us to me while still using the language of we. In Machiavellian terms, the alliance continues only because the cost of open war, divorce, scandal, loss, still outweighs the benefits of conquest. From the outside, such households may appear intact. They attend gatherings, post pictures, and maintain routines. Yet behind every gesture lies calculation. Even kindness becomes political, a smile given to manage suspicion, a gift offered to keep peace. Authentic emotion has been replaced by diplomacy. The relationship now survives the way old regimes do, through inertia and appearances rather than belief. The tragedy of this stage is that neither side truly wins. The rebel discovers that freedom obtained through destruction tastes hollow. The loyal partner learns that loyalty without respect is servitude. Both confront the same truth. The family they built was never destroyed by lack of love but by the corrosion of power balance. When equilibrium dies, affection soon follows. Still, even in ruin, the Machiavellian observer sees pattern rather than chaos. The process is predictable because it mirrors every system's life cycle: creation, expansion, stagnation, revolt, decay. The rebellion that began as an attempt to feel alive ends as proof that all empires, domestic or political, are temporary constructions maintained only by vigilance and fear. When the struggle finally burns itself out, what remains is silence, the kind of silence that follows the collapse of a regime. The players are the same, yet the landscape has changed. Familiar rooms feel foreign, daily routines run on inertia, and the words we sound like echoes from another life. What began as rebellion for self-definition ends as a negotiation for survival. In the aftermath, each side must confront the one adversary that cannot be manipulated: consequence. The rebel, having torn down the old order, stands among the ruins of their own design. Freedom is real, but so is the emptiness that follows it. They had imagined liberation would restore youth, passion, and recognition. Instead, it exposes how much of their identity depended on opposition. With no structure left to defy, they discover that rebellion cannot be a permanent home. It is a weapon, not a dwelling. The loyal partner faces a different reckoning. They must rebuild a sense of power without the role that once defined them. For years, they measured value through service, control, or devotion. Now those currencies are obsolete. Some retreat into resignation, others reinvent themselves. The Machiavellian observer would note that this phase, painful as it is, often produces the most genuine form of independence, authority born not from dominance, but from detachment. Children, friends, and bystanders experience the aftermath as observers of a fallen kingdom. They remember the years of peace and the years of tension, but what shapes them most is the recognition that every alliance, no matter how intimate, requires constant maintenance of respect and power balance. The lesson is cold but clarifying: love alone sustains nothing, structure and perception hold it together. In many cases, a period of diplomatic truce follows. The former partners, whether separated or still coexisting, begin to communicate with the weary courtesy of seasoned politicians. The emotional war has ended, but the political one continues in softer forms: financial arrangements, social narratives, shared responsibilities. Both sides seek to preserve a version of themselves that history will treat kindly. Apologies, if they appear, are often tactical rather than repentant. Forgiveness becomes another word for damage control. Machiavelli would find this closing act predictable. Once power equilibrium has been destroyed, no reconciliation can truly restore it. What replaces it is governance by caution, each participant now aware of how quickly affection can become leverage. Paradoxically, this awareness, born from pain, creates a new, colder kind of stability. People learn to manage expectations, to value distance as safety, to understand that peace obtained through vigilance may be the only kind that lasts. The wider lesson extends beyond households. The midlife rebellion is simply one iteration of a universal law: every human system decays when its members confuse comfort with control. Youth conquers, maturity administers, decline rebels. The cycle repeats across history, corporations, and countries, because it is written into human psychology. We crave significance more than happiness, and when significance fades, we create turmoil to recover it. In the ashes of control, a strange clarity emerges. The rebel realizes that power sought through chaos consumes itself. The once loyal partner understands that stability without mutual respect is a slow form of death. Both learn, often too late, that love is not sustained by passion alone but by the continuous renewal of authority and admiration. When either element disappears, rebellion is only a matter of time. And so the story ends not with villains or victims, but with survivors, each carrying the knowledge that all relationships are temporary truces between two ambitions, two fears, two shifting definitions of self. To live intelligently within them is to recognize this truth early, protect the balance of power as fiercely as the illusion of love, for once one collapses, the other will surely follow. In the end, the Machiavellian truth is merciless but pure: no rebellion happens without reason, and no collapse happens without cause. What we call madness in midlife is often the human spirit refusing to die quietly inside the prison it built. But the tragedy lies in mistaking destruction for freedom. To tear down the walls that suffocate you is one thing, to burn the house that sheltered you is another. Power, once awakened, demands expression. It does not ask if the stage it destroys is sacred. And that is why so many lives unravel not from cruelty, but from hunger, the hunger to feel significant again, to reclaim what time, neglect, and routine have stolen. Every rebellion is, at its core, an attempt to rewrite memory. To say, I was not wasted. I mattered. I still matter. Yet power reclaimed through chaos never grants peace, it merely changes the form of dependence. The woman who defies her age to prove her worth often finds herself chained to the same validation she sought to escape. The man who clings to control becomes a prisoner of the very dominance he wields. And both learn too late that in the pursuit of superiority, they forfeited intimacy. Machiavelli would not mourn this outcome, he would call it the price of awakening. To understand human nature deeply is to lose faith in its innocence. Every bond contains a struggle for advantage, every promise hides an agenda, every declaration of love conceals a fear of insignificance. The wise do not deny this, they manage it. They treat relationships not as fairy tales but as negotiations of respect, attraction, and power. When one side forgets this, collapse is inevitable. So the midlife rebellion is not insanity, it is revelation. It exposes the buried truth of human desire, that we are loyal only while loyalty rewards us, and moral only while morality flatters us. And when it ceases to, we rebel, not out of evil, but out of necessity. The lesson, then, is simple and cruel: understand this pattern early, or you will live long enough to play your part in it. This was The Midlife Rebellion, Machiavelli Psychology. A study not of monsters or saints, but of human beings, each ruled by their own private kingdom of needs, illusions, and power. And in the end, every kingdom falls, not because it is wrong, but because it is human.